Okay.
Okay.
Okay. Episode 1. We're gonna pour ourselves a little whiskey to start. And I don't know, Shelby, what are we gonna call this thing? We've talked about whiskey and wealth, or we could make it a little bit more professional and do legacy planning or building your legacy. I don't know. What do you like?
I don't know. I kind of like you came up with whiskey and wealth yourself, so I feel like that should be the one we go.
Well, it's Friday afternoon, and why the hell not, right?
Yeah. When this gets posted, it'll probably be on a weekday, but
That's true.
That's okay.
But we're gonna
That's
record
okay.
on Fridays,
Yes.
so it's whiskey. For this is not the middle of the day whiskey.
No.
So
No.
But so my whiskey glass says, always carry a flask of whiskey in case of a snake bite. And further, always carry a snake.
I like that. What
so
you're gonna
that's-
have to do is, if you call it wealth and whiskey or whiskey and wealth, you're gonna have to get multiple forms of whiskey and tell the viewers what you're.
So we can do that. So every week we'll do we'll feature a new whiskey. Today,
oh wow, okay.
Yeah, it's fine. That's not a problem.
There you go. There's your marketing.
So
for that.
today we are trying the Glenmorangie, A Tale of Tokyo. It's not bad. It's a little harsh.
I'll be a fake whiskey drinker.
We will turn Shelby into a whiskey drinker.
I don't think that's gonna happen.
I might. We'll see.
You never know. Stranger things have happened.
Well, that's all right. We'll figure it out sooner or later. Maybe we'll get martinis or beers or wine.
Listen,
Wine's good.
I was gonna say wine and martinis. I would be all about.
We can get good booze in here for the martinis, and we'll get some wine too.
That's my cup of tea right there.
Are you red or white?
White. I like, unless if it's a sweet
white
red.
with ice in it.
Unless if it's
that's
sweet
a little
red.
That's a little like white trashy. Yeah, that's how I drink my white.
I don't normally. Really, you put ice in your wine?
My white wine, just because I like it a little cold.
You just put it in the refrigerator.
Well, that's probably right.
That's what
now don't put ice in your red wine. That's probably not good.
What does that do?
I don't know. It probably makes it disgusting.
Oh, I don't know. Unless the only type of red wine I like is if it's like a super sweet cherry or fruit wine, but it has to be really sweet. And normally the red ones aren't. So I prefer white.
So we just need to find you some sweet reds.
Yeah.
I got a couple at home. We'll bring them in for next week. It'll be good.
Love it.
Okay. Well, let's get down to business. So whiskey and wisdom, or whiskey and wealth, whatever we're going to call it, I don't know yet, is really about, well, let me tell about me for a second. And I'll talk about myself.
Yourself.
Okay, cool. So my name is Phil Reed. I'm an attorney in Michigan. I specialize in asset protection planning and estate planning, and that sounds super boring. But
no,
it's going to be really cool. So we're going to take some time and we're going to run through every question that may exist, from dealing with probate to avoiding lawsuits to protecting your assets to helping you grow assets. We're going to talk about wealth vehicles and investment vehicles. We're going to talk about staying motivated to stay on your dreams, I guess.
Yeah.
So, but the idea is to educate everybody out there about these topics in a fun, hopefully exciting way.
Yes.
So,
yes, exactly.
Tell us a little bit about you, Shelby, since you're joining us.
Hi. Well, depending on what day of the week it is or where I'm posting, my name is different. So if I'm playing a show or you're listening to my music, I'm Shelby Lentz, Lentz. But if you're listening right now as just a regular person, I'm Shelby Smithers.
Check it out. Are you on YouTube Music?
Yeah, I'm on all the.
Shelby Lentz. Shelby Lentz Music. Go check it out.
Thank you.
She's very talented.
Thank you. Yep. I told my husband I wasn't going to change it when I did music because I did
That's your brand.
I did it 13 years as Lentz when I was not married. So it's like you get me as Smithers everywhere else except for when I'm performing. So I actually interned for Phil in college, and now here I am again. So
she called me and said, I want a job. And I said, this is perfect. I need to help me out. So
the perfect timing.
I said, guess
6
what?
years later.
You're going to do bad podcasts with me.
No.
So
I'm having a crisis thinking that was 6 years ago that I graduated from college.
Has it been 6 years?
7 years since I started as an intern.
That's nuts.
Yeah.
That's
nuts. Just dated both of us.
Wow. No, I got the gray in it. You don't have any gray yet.
Oh, I do have gray. I color it.
Oh, well, then that works.
Yep.
21. My wife said if I color my beard, she's like, don't do that. That's going to look horrible.
That's okay. My husband tells me that at least I have hair to color.
That's True. I'm slowly running out of it as well. So I feel him. I feel it. I feel it.
That's okay. That's okay. That's just a part of it.
So that's good. So, anyways, so that's us. I run a small law practice in Kalamazoo, but I work all over the country for asset protection.
Hmm.
And what that means is asset protection is stopping anybody who wants to take your hard-earned money or your hard-earned assets. Okay, so we'll use viable official legal structures to make sure that we're protecting against anybody who wants to take your money. That could be creditors, that could be lawsuit, could be the IRS, number
Mm-mm.
one creditor every year, could be
Not
stock
gonna.
market losses. And people say that stock market's not a creditor. It feels like it when you lose 30% in a year. So we're going to talk about all that kind of stuff. But today I think we're going to talk about, what are we talking about today?
We're talking about probate today.
Probate.
Probate, what
Voiding
it is
probate.
and why it matters.
Okay. Well, why it matters is if you die, if you plan to die,
If you plan to
if you
die,
plan to die,
at some point we all do.
you're probably
Can't
not going to
avoid
get
that.
out of it.
Nope.
Death rate is right
No.
about 100%.
Yep.
So if you die, you will ultimately, without a proper plan, end up in probate. And what probate is it's a court proceeding. It's an administrative court proceeding. I always like to tell people it's filing a dead loss or filing a lawsuit against your dead self.
Ugh,
Doesn't that
that's
sound good?
morbid. I
It
don't
is
like. I
pretty
don't like
morbid.
that.
So essentially what happens, probate is the process. So when somebody passes away, um, they have to their stuff has to go somewhere, right? So let's say you have a house, let's say you have a car, you have some cash, maybe a puppy, I don't know, we'll see. But you die, we've got to make sure that those assets are getting to the next generation or the people
Mm,
that you want. Probate is the process of involving the court to make sure that we're going to do that. Now, as you can imagine, going to court is probably not fun. Anytime I ask somebody, "Hey, have you ever been through probate?" and they say, "Yeah, I've been through probate," and I ask them, "How was it?" and they're like, "It was the most awful experience ever."
yeah, because you're grieving and now you got to go through probate.
Well, yeah, that's it.
Yeah.
That's it. So when you're dealing with probate, you're dealing with the loss of usually a loved one. Maybe it's somebody you don't love, but usually it's a loved one.
That's fair.
Usually it's a loved one. And now you got to deal with the court, which is just always a miserable experience. I've been an attorney now for what? I don't know, 12 years, and I hate going to court.
I don't like going to
So
court.
if I can avoid going to court, that's what I want to do. So what we're going to talk about. So probate essentially is allowing yourself to file a lawsuit against your dead self. So your stuff can be dispersed to whomever you want. Now, if you don't have a plan, which means you don't have at least a will, and a will is simply where does my stuff go if I die? And if you have little kids, it's who's going to take care of my kids if I pass away, which as a dad is pretty scary. So
Yep.
so I know you don't have kids yet. I
Not
know
yet.
they're hopefully on the way
Hopefully.
some point in time in the future.
Yeah.
I have two little girls. They're 8 and 10, Natalie and Sasha.
Crazy.
Shelby's biggest fans, by the way. They're always in the front row at any of the shows she does.
I love them.
But if I passed away, my wife passed away, who's going to take care of them? So having a plan is really important to make sure that not only your stuff transfers to whom you want, but your loved ones who are underage are taken care of.
Hmm.
So essentially, that's what probate is. It's the court proceeding to help administer that. Now, if you die without a plan, so you die without a will, that means you die intestate. Intestate essentially is I have no will, I have no instructions for the court. So what happens at that point in time is you still have to go through the probate process, but the Michigan statute or the statute in whatever state that you live in is going to dictate how things are handled. So who gets it? How much they get, if there's any exemptions there. So if you're married, does your spouse get it all, or is there a
Hmm.
certain amount to it? Does it go to the kids? Does it go to mom and dad? How does that work? And the statute is specifically designed to kind of flow through. The problem is not all families are created equal. So dying without a plan or at least direction to the court can be a huge problem.
Sounds like a nightmare.
It is a nightmare. So if you
Absolutely
die
a nightmare.
intestate, you do not want to have your family members and your loved ones go through that
Mm-mm.
process. So the other way is you have a will, and a will you still have to go to probate, but you've at least allowed for some instruction to say
Fun.
this is where I want my stuff to go. This is who I want to take care of my kids. So having a will is usually the bare minimum of planning that you need to have. Now, can you guess how many people in the United States today, or what the percentage is, that do not have an estate plan in place?
I'm gonna guess it's pretty high.
What do you think?
Uh, 80.
That's pretty close,
Really?
actually.
I was
Yeah,
gonna say
no, that's
70,
very
and I
close.
said 80. I was like,
Actually,
I feel like it's
70
higher.
70% would have been correct.
Oh, I should
So
have went with
you
that
said
one
don't
first.
hedge, don't
I
hedge.
went,
So
that seems too low
no,
because I
no,
feel like it's almost
it's
everybody.
like 69.8% or something like that. I don't know where they get the numbers, but essentially 70% of the population does not have an estate plan, which is kind of crazy because 100% of them will pass away at some
Yep.
point in time.
I mean, to be fair, I am currently one of those 70%. So
You know what? That's okay. We're gonna work on that. In fact, maybe we'll do a podcast about you
oh,
putting one together.
putting one together. Oh, there you go. There's a
That'd
whole
be good.
episode for you.
There's a whole one there. So that's probate. Now, the big question that comes up is, okay, how do we avoid going to court? And that's, I think, what we're going to delve into a little bit more today. Shelby
Yeah.
was kind enough to put together some questions for us, so we can make sure we're doing so.
Yeah. Oh goodness. Okay. Let's see. I think I got ahead of myself. Is this on a double page?
No, that's
No,
all
it's
right.
not. Okay, well we went through that.
Why probate matters. The downside of probate.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so is it so bad to go through court? If you've ever been to court, yes, court sucks. It does. It's very rigid. It's administrative. It's very cold. It's procedural. It's very difficult. So the thing that's problematic generally about probate, whether you have a will or don't have a will, is usually the cost. The cost is going to be the primary thing that most heirs, after they've lost a loved one, have to start shelling out some money. So the average probate cost in the United States is about 3 to 8% of the estate. So, which is kind of crazy. Now you can get it done cheaper if the
That does
estate's
seem
pretty
like pretty
simple,
high.
but it's pretty high,
Yeah, that
right?
seems pretty high.
So the reason it's so high is it's not just the court filing fees, which are going to be right off the gate. You've got attorney costs, you've got appraisal fees, you've got um, sale fees, you've got to sell personal property, you got to get the properties cleaned out. There's a lot of stuff that goes into it, but the administration costs are usually pretty high, and that's because attorneys are not cheap. Most attorneys are going to be $300 to $500 an hour. Some of them you can get
Oof.
for $250. Just wonder
Be
if they're cheap.
be wary of them.
Be wary.
Oh, jeez.
Not saying no. There's actually a lot of good attorneys that don't charge a lot, but again, there's usually reasons that attorneys charge different values. Now,
Mhm.
$500 attorneys, not always the best attorneys either,
That's fair.
but they charge a lot.
That's fair.
So, it looks like it's expensive.
You'd hope so.
Yeah. But there's a lot of costs. So, I mean, if you think about it, so if somebody dies with a $500,000 estate, that's $15,000 that's usually going to be paid to an
Yeah.
estate administration. So that's a lot. So the cost is definitely a problem. And when that starts coming out of the inheritance, that is sometimes difficult to swallow
Oh,
for
for
people,
sure.
So the other thing is it takes time. So minimally, there's usually a minimum requirement when you start a probate, that the probate needs to be open because you got to notify all the creditors that this person's died and if they're going to bring a claim.
Oh,
So
if they
yeah,
died with debt,
yes, correct.
who has
So
to bear the debt?
the estate. So
Okay,
as a
okay.
beneficiary, you do not have to bear the debt. You are not responsible for
I
the
was
debt.
about to say that
You're like, come on.
they just passed and now I have to handle all this
No,
stuff.
so but the creditors can come back and file a claim and ask for payment, or at least partial payment,
Okay, from the
from
state.
from the estate. So you have to put notice out into the world that, hey, this person died. If you're a creditor, bring forth your claims. Now, the nice thing is if they don't bring it in the necessary time period, they kind of lose their right to collect.
Interesting.
So that's why it's always good to get that out right away before everybody realizes that
That they're
somebody.
gone.
Exactly.
Yeah, you're
So
doing your due diligence.
but again, those things can add up, and you got to start. The estate has to pay for those. The other thing, so it takes some time. Usually, a normal estate in Michigan, for example, minimum time period for an estate is 4 months. Usually, when I do an estate, it's anywhere from 12 to 18 months. It can be longer. I've got a couple of estates that have been almost 3 years
Oh
now.
my gosh.
So, like, yeah, it
Now,
can.
is that because of how intense they are? Because of lack of communication on their
So
end?
yeah, so it can be partly family disputes. Sometimes it's just difficult to liquidate property or get things. So sometimes somebody comes in and the person's maybe a hoarder,
Ooh,
and somebody has to
yeah.
come in and like clean that out, and then they have to fix up the house and sell it, and it just takes a lot of
Yeah,
time.
that makes sense.
Because I mean, can you imagine? Like, yeah, that's what I want to go do is clean out Aunt Verla's house that's full of boxes of Time magazines.
Uh-huh. Yeah, I just went through that
Yeah. So
with my
what?
dad. Well,
Really?
he's still here, but we
We
moved
got to clean it
him
out.
and we had to clean out his old home because my aunt and uncle are his powers of attorney.
Oh
So they
yeah,
got him a house closer to all of us and we had to go and clean out all of his remainings from my childhood home. Absolute nightmare.
yeah.
Absolute nightmare.
So, and I've seen some bad ones. I don't know how bad this one was.
Um, yeah.
It was
It was
it
not
was
great.
enough.
It
It
was
was enough
not
to
great.
not to
He's not
say,
no,
okay,
not
gotcha.
able to keep up with the house.
That's fair. So, but I mean that happens a lot, especially with older people. They some people are shut-ins and they let the house deteriorate. They kind of live by themselves. These things can be kind of nightmares that go through. And if there's no check and balance beforehand,
Mhm.
this is things that can kind of build up. It's very difficult. Um, Additionally, just the emotional impact of having to deal with government administrative procedures when you're grieving. The last thing you want to do is like, when do I have to file this? When is this due? Do I have to deal with the attorney? Do I got to go to the attorney's office? Those things take time and they just compound the stress that usually families go through. And then, God forbid, there's a dispute about who gets what.
Oh, no.
And that is death and taxes. I always say death and probate because probate is the fastest way to like rip a family apart.
I was about to say, I feel like a lot of other sides of people are exposed when someone passes.
Oh, absolutely. I had an estate that we probated. They came in. They didn't work with me ahead of time to develop a plan, but they came in. Dad died, or it might have been mom. I can't remember. And there wasn't much in the probate. It was like $26,000, and three kids like fought tooth and nail over it, and it ripped them apart. They don't talk anymore.
Oh,
Over $26 thousand
yeah, I was
dollars.
gonna say that
It's crazy, right?
was it just those 3 that were left that money, and they didn't wanna split it?
Well, and it wasn't all cash. I mean, they were
Okay.
fighting over like a dining room table that was worth
Oh
like
gosh.
$500.
Come on now.
Oh, it's crazy. And then I remember in this one there was a table and they were moving and it was glass and it broke, and that started a whole bunch of stuff too. So again, there was no plan in place. Who was going to take over the house? Who was going to get into one of the brothers got into the account and pulled out his third, and he wasn't really supposed to do that. And
Oof.
yeah, it was a whole thing. So going through that process without a plan is, in my experience, it's never really smooth. Even if they
Mm.
have a will in place, there's still bumps in the road. So, you know, those are some of just the kind of nightmare stories that happen. So, how do you get around that? Steps to avoid probate. Well, there's a couple different ways that people can do that. One is what they call pay on death transfers. So, if you set up a bank account, they'll usually ask you, if you die, where should this be dispersed to? I don't know if when you set it up, your bank account did that. You
I
might not even
actually don't
remember doing that.
remember if it did or not.
So, it usually you do, but sometimes you don't. Sometimes you don't even think about it. But essentially, you can set things up where, hey, if I die, it's paid to Shelby. So my bank account here is just, if I die, here's a death certificate, it's paid out to you. That can work in certain aspects. But the problem is people have more than one or two or three assets. So a lot of times I'll have people come in and they'll say, well, my kids are listed on the bank account, My kids are listed on the investment account, and I put everybody on the title of the house, so I'm good to go. Theoretically, that will work to transfer the assets and avoid court.
Mhm.
But what happens, especially if there's more than one heir, things start to kind of crack, you know? And sometimes it's a dispute over the assets. Sometimes the kid is married and mom and dad die and they're getting through divorce. Now they're fighting over the inheritance.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Oh, that's
It's
so
crazy. It's kinda dirty,
oh,
right?
yeah,
You're
that's
kinda like, "Ooh," I feel kinda gross about that.
yeah.
But that kinda stuff happens, or something happens. Maybe one of the kids, became disabled, and they're receiving government benefits. They had an illness, or close head injury, or something, illness, or, you know, whatever it might be. But now all of a sudden they're receiving government benefits, and then if they own property or they
They
receive a bunch of,
lose the
they can lose the
benefits.
benefits.
Ah,
So
that is so
it's crazy,
complex.
right?
Yeah.
And it is. So a lot of times people think they'll come in and I just need a simple estate plan, or they say I've done all my titling, I'm good to go. So we start to talk about these things, and then I also tell them, well, what happens if you're still here but you're incapacitated?
Oh,
Let's say
they
you get
haven't
older and you
yeah.
start to develop Alzheimer's or dementia. What happens? So, um, and they go, well, they don't really think about that part of it
Nope.
because it's either I'm here and then I'm going to be dead and everything's good. So
Well,
you
and we as Americans, which people in general, but especially, we don't wanna talk about death.
no, people hate it.
No, absolutely not.
I have clients come in all the time that they can't get their spouse in because their spouse does not want to
Doesn't
talk
wanna
about
s
death. They just they
it is really heavy.
it's
I
it's
mean
tough. I mean, nobody wants to talk about it. But the funny thing is every single one of my clients, especially the ones that are super resistant, as soon as it's done, as soon as their plan's done,
they never regret it.
no. That's like this huge relief off their head. Because what they do is they just ignore it. They compartmentalize, but it's still there. It's kind of on the back of their shoulder. So once the plan's in place, so you can, again, going back to, you can title assets and try to transfer it that way, set up a deed or whatever. But a lot of times people like to do it yourself, and we'll talk about do it yourself problems. Um, but and the thing is they don't plan. It's not a plan. It's just this is an action step.
Mhm.
So that's one. The other way is formulating and putting together a plan, hopefully with the help of an experienced attorney. Not all attorneys are good at this kind of stuff, just like not all doctors are good at
No.
their
No, they are not.
specialties. You know what I'm saying?
Nope.
So, also, just because you found a document online does not necessarily mean it's a good document or even specific to your state that you're in or country. I've seen people use trust from other countries, which is pretty interesting. So,
Oh.
yeah, it's crazy. So, when we're getting to that, when we're starting to put together a plan, the best way to avoid probate is the utilization of what they call a revocable living trust. So, what's a trust is what people usually ask me.
Mhm.
What the hell is that? I kind of get it. It's a bank, right? No, it's not a bank. A trust is essentially there's two ways I like to describe it. One, the trust is it's like a safe. So you have a safe, you're going to put all your valuable stuff in the safe. It's secure, right? And then you're going to lock it up. And only the trustees have access to it. So if it's my safe, I'm going to have access to all of that stuff in the safe. If I'm unable to handle my daily affairs, so I'm disabled or something or incapacitated, I'm going to give a successor trustee access to the trust so they can unlock the safe and get the stuff out. That's kind of a nice analogy. I also like the analogy of a pickup truck. So a trust is like a pickup truck. It sounds kind of stupid, right? I don't know. Some people
And
don't
I
like
love analogies.
some people don't like this analogy. They think it's really dumb, but I think it kind of makes sense. So go with me and you can tell me after this if you're
Okay.
like if I'm correct.
Nope.
So, all right, so a trust is like a pickup truck. I drive a Dodge Ram 1500. It's awesome. Some people are Ford and Chevy people, but I used to drive a Ford, so um but it's like a pickup truck. The trust is the truck, and you are the driver of the truck. So wherever you go, the trust goes with you. So you and the trust are kind of the same thing. Now, the trust allows you to put all of your stuff in the bed of the pickup truck. So we're going to put your cash in there, your investment accounts, your property, your personal property, intellectual property rights. You're a singer, so you have intellectual property
Oh, I didn't even
rights.
think about that.
Oh yeah,
When
we
I
got to make sure
die,
these
who
are
does that
taken
go
care of.
to?
So All of those things go into the bed of the pickup truck, right? So while you're here, all that stuff is connected with you. You control it, you're driving it around. Now, if you get to the point where you can't drive the truck anymore, you're incapacitated, health or mental capacity, you get to ride the passenger seat. We assign somebody else to drive for you. All that stuff's still there for your benefit, right? Then when we get to death, usually if you died, again, either intestate or testate with a will, you'd have to go to courthouse. The trust completely bypasses the courthouse. We do not need to go to court,
Wow.
which is really cool. So this is where probate avoidance comes in. So what we've done is all of the stuff isn't, you're not carrying it. So if
Mm-hmm.
you go to probate, you're dead, and now you gotta carry all this stuff to probate. The truck is holding all this stuff.
Mm,
So it doesn't have to, even though you're dead, it doesn't go to probate. What happens is the trustee says, okay, now I got to figure out where this stuff goes. I do not need to make a stop at court. Cool. So now we've
thank
taken that
God.
off. The good thing about that is A, we've gotten rid of those costs. We've gotten rid of the pressure of dealing with the court systems and all the other emotional stuff that comes with it. Plus, it's private. If it's a court proceeding, it's public record. If it's a trust, it's private.
Don't want that public.
No. So,
Don't
and
want
especially if
that.
you have stuff of value, you have a lot of
Mm-hmm.
money, you may not want the probate courts or people to look at the probate courts and say, "Oh,
No.
you know." So it's interesting because there's some famous people that didn't have estate plans.
Really?
Yeah, like Prince
I
when
was
he
gonna say,
died.
do you have an example?
Prince
Prince?
Prince
What?
Prince's estate was worth like $100 million
And he did
or something like that. It was insane. It was like this insane amount of money. He didn't even will. His estate was
how?
litigated for like 10 years before people got the money. Now, the attorneys probably made out pretty well on that one.
Oh, 100%.
But I mean, I don't know who was advising him, for God's sakes, but I mean, he has his intellectual property, he had all his cash, all his assets, all this nothing. And people fought over it. Family members,
Well, yeah, because he was
girlfriends, the
super
whole nine yards.
wealthy.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, I mean, if you have that kind of status, it's gonna get really messy. I
So
think someone was trying to screw him over.
yeah. Oh yeah. I mean, and
100%.
people just I always tell people, listen, if you got the $100 or $150 to file, you can file an action in court. Doesn't matter if it's justified or not. So those type of things. So with the trust though, it's in the pickup truck, and the successor trustee, the person who's taking it over after the person dies, looks at I like to call the GPS. They look at the trust document and they say, okay, this is who it goes to. This is how it goes to them. This is when it goes to them, and in what capacity, if there's any limitation. So it gives a full outline detail of how to transfer those assets. Now, a lot of times it'll just be like, okay, Shelby, you're the inheritor or the beneficiary of the trust. You're going to inherit this stuff. We're going to just take the truck right over to your house and we're going to unload it. Here you go. Here's your money. But there may be some times where we need to put some limitations on it. So
Especially if they're a minor.
especially if they're a
Yeah,
minor,
yeah.
absolutely. But let's say they're not a minor, but they're really bad with money
Or young,
or young,
like 17, 18.
exactly,
Yeah,
or really bad with credit, and
that too.
they owe a ton of people money,
Yep.
right? So creditors will look and say, "Oh, you came into some money, time to pay your debts."
Oh, yeah.
So the trust can limit the distribution
Of that money.
of that money
That's
and
smart.
protect it from people, protect it from themselves, protect it from other people, protect it from creditors. So there's lots of cool things you can do. So for example, um, I have two little girls, Natalie and Sasha, and we have a trust. And if my wife and I pass away, they don't get it at 18.
Thank God. You shouldn't.
No, well, like, what would you like if you
No
had a
way.
million bucks
No
at
way.
18? What
Uh,
would you have done?
oh, anything.
Yeah,
Anything that's not
absolutely.
smart.
Oh yeah.
Like go well, I mean, I'm not gonna say vacation is not smart, but I would have blown it all. Like I wouldn't have put any of it away, is what I'm saying.
I always think about it, and I'm like, I probably would have a really hell of a nice car, like really nice car,
Yeah.
and a lot of dates, and probably not much at 19. Yeah, I would have pissed it all away. It would have
Oh,
been gone.
100%. That's I think of all the celebrities who
Yeah.
like come into wealth and then they lose it immediately.
Well, you think about that, and I mean, the list is so long where like
Or NBA,
NBA
football
football
players. Yep.
players, actors, they get all this cash, and then all of a sudden it's gone, and they're broke. It's like, how do you broke on $20 million a year? but they don't know how to handle it
Mhm.
because they it's just thrust upon them immediately. It's the same thing that can happen with an inheritance, even a small inheritance of, well, I say small, but let's say somebody gets 100 grand and they've never seen that kind of money ever.
Oh, mhm.
They make minimum wage, and now all of a sudden they have $100,000. It seems like all the money in the world
Until you go to college.
until you go to college, and it's all gone. They just take it all.
Then it seems like nothing.
But if you just give it to them outright, they'll spend it. Hey, I'm going to buy a new truck. I'm going to go buy
Mhm.
on a vacation. I'm going to go to the bar, and I'm picking up the
Paying the whole
tab.
tab.
That doesn't take very long to blow
Mm.
through all that money. So we have it set up where the money's there for the girls, but they don't have access to it. It can be used for them because my trustee will dole out what they need for their education, for
Mhm.
their welfare, and things like that. But they can't just take it and spend it
Until a certain age.
until they get to a certain age. And
Okay.
then, so I've got it tiered up. So there's different ways you can
By
structure
their
it.
ages.
So when they reach
Ah.
25, they can take like 25% and do
Mhm.
whatever they want with it. And if they waste it, they piss it away. Okay. But then at 30, they can get another 25% of that principal. But all through that time, they're being taken care of. So they have money. So if they make mistakes and they spend chunks of it, they're not spending it all. So I'm kind of protecting them against themselves. Now,
Yep.
as they get a little bit older, if they're good with money, I can modify that. I can change it. If they're in a high risk profession that might be subject to being sued, maybe we don't. Maybe if they marry the wrong person and it looks like it's going to end in
Oh.
divorce, so we can take those things into consideration, which is pretty cool. But the nice thing, the key there, when developing that type of plan, is we have the ability to completely bypass probate and also control it. So essentially, at the end of the day, the trust does four primary things. There's a lot, but number one, we avoid probate. So we stay out of court,
Good.
save money, save time, save headache. Number two, it's private. So your family's business is your family's business. It does not need to be on center stage in the courts. Number three, which I didn't really talk about today, but it can avoid or minimize estate tax. Now, right now, I didn't really talk
Mm.
about that today because the exemption rate is like over $13 million a person. If you're married, you can double that. That will sunset back down to about 7 million a person at the end of 2025, unless Trump extends the tax act, which we'll see what happens there. So it's pretty high. So if you don't have that kind of money, you don't really have to worry about estate
I
taxes.
was going to say that would
That's a
I don't
lot.
see that happening in my future.
Well, you never. Hey, all you need is one hit song.
There you go. You don't wanna have me talk about royalties, that will make everyone sad.
Exactly. Exactly.